Hey everyone, it's Dr. Mary. Yep, I'm here on my own. I didn't ditch Gillian. She's actually, okay, so this is the introduction to season 6, and it's going to look a little different because believe it or not, our summer and our fall has just been so busy that Gillian and I literally couldn't get together to record this podcast. So it's going to look a little different this year. Partly it's because, as many of you know, I just released my new book, Rebecoming, Come Out of Hiding to Live as Your God-Given Essential Self. Oh, I'm going to show it to you for those of you who are watching on video. And here it is. Ta-da! Yeah. Anyway, with all that being said, I was surprisingly busy doing a lot of different podcasts and shows to promote the book. I had no idea what was involved. So unfortunately, Gillian and I couldn't get together. So what we thought we would do is I'm going to kind of kick off the season with 2 episodes introducing sort of the behind the scenes. Today, I'm going to talk about what led up to the writing of this book. And next episode, I'm going to talk about what it was like actually writing it and all of the stuff that came afterwards, just processing through some of those emotions, because I think it will give you some good background to some of what, as we go through the season and talk through the book, perhaps some context for you. So then those will be the first 2 episodes. And then Gillian is going to have a surprise guest host, and they are going to record some segments that will then play through November into December, and you won't see me again until January. And in January, Gillian and I will go back to doing our usual shtick where we're going to record together and hopefully finish the book from that point. Okay, so like I said, I wanted to give you some background as to what was behind the scenes in writing this book. It came out of a very difficult season for me personally and professionally. I was feeling close to burnout, and for those of you who have had experienced burnout, you know how debilitating it can be. I mean, I was just trying to get through my day, sleepwalking really. And I was recognizing that there was some dysfunction there, but at that time it was just easier to blame the circumstances or other people around me, to be honest. And it took a while. It wasn't until afterwards that I was able to process and reflect and kind of go, wait a minute, I actually played a really key role in feeling stuck. And I was actually literally making choices and decisions that was keeping me stuck. And that it actually took me a long time to break free from that place of stuckness. And so that's kind of what I was having to spend some time reflecting on that led to the writing of this book. And you'll know as you read the book that there is a section in there about our survival instinct. And again, like I can preach it, and but understanding how it plays out in my life, that is a whole next level of self-awareness. So as Gillian and I have talked about on a number of different episodes, we've talked about the survival instinct and how when we get triggered or afraid, we get into fight or flight mode, and there's also freeze mode. And there's also one called fawn, spelled F-A-W-N, which is more the people-pleasing, bend over backwards, do whatever you can to try to fit in and not get into any trouble. And that was what I was recognizing was happening with me. I mean, again, it was just so hidden and so much a part of how I did life that I didn't really recognize it. But upon reflection, I mean, there's a lot of things in my life that shaped me, certainly culturally. As an Asian family, I watched my mom, who was a very strong and brilliant woman, but because of her culture, our culture, being Taiwanese, and also the age that she grew up in, I watched her regularly and I'm saying this in quotes, submit to my dad simply because she was female and he was male. And I watched that, even though she actually was, from a temperament standpoint, more wired towards leadership than he actually was. He was very relational, sort of a soft, easygoing kind of a guy who can more easily go with the flow. So that's one aspect that was very significant. And I haven't even begun to unpack all the layers of how that's impacted me. But the second really strong influence was my faith background. And I was raised in a tradition where, we were taught that women should follow the leadership of men, and that actually when I was younger, in some aspects of my faith journey, women weren't even allowed to teach or preach, and certainly take positions of leadership. They weren't even allowed to be called pastor. And for some of you listening or watching, this could still be your faith tradition. So I mean absolutely no disrespect if that's what you believe. I'm just wanting to share how I think that type of upbringing shaped me. So my cultural background being Asian, and then my faith background and being female and Canadian, because Canadian's all about being nice. And I grew up in the era of the 60s and the 70s. And at that time, that was when what's called second wave feminism kind of started to take root, but it hadn't really made its mark yet, at least not in my life. And so at that time, super common to have sexual harassment, sexual attention from men that I just didn't want. In fact, getting that attention for being female, for being Asian. And that was at the time that the whole geisha culture was kind of coming out, which actually is not sexual at all, but that was how it was being perceived. And so there was a lot of unwanted attention, and I didn't quite know how to deal with it. I wasn't taught how to deal with it. So I just tried to ignore it. And my response, looking back, was a fawn response where I would smile and just get myself out of that situation and not confront the person or not really do anything to make a fuss. And that's kind of what I feel was going on for me. So I believe that actually a lot of women with my cultural background and faith background were taught the same thing. Be nice, be kind, be giving, don't make a scene, be gentle and quiet. I think Gillian could definitely speak to this with her mega personality, which I absolutely, absolutely adore. I know she struggles with inner critic because sometimes she feels like she's heard the message too often that she's too much. And that breaks my heart to hear that. But again, that's the time in which we were raised. And so it impacted us in how we responded to tough stuff. And I think what happens and what had happened to me is that when we enter situations or relationships that are unhealthy or even toxic for us, we actually don't track with it. I certainly didn't track it or notice it. I just learned to tolerate it. It was just the way it was. I didn't feel like I had power to change it. So I just tried to make my way, doing the best that I could. And I think now, looking back again, it's a fawn response where we bend over backwards to accommodate, to be nice, to be tolerant, as part of surviving in a world, at least for me, where I felt like I didn't have a voice. Yeah, so that was kind of a significant reflection as I look back to why I stayed stuck for as long as I did in situations and relationships that really weren't that healthy for me. I not jokingly tell leaders when I coach them that when they're leading people, they will trigger mommy and daddy issues in the people that they lead. And it's so ironic that I said that because absolutely for me, as I was being led, I was dealing with my own issues too. And I'm not saying that the leaders I was working for didn't have their own dysfunction and that they weren't contributing to some of the toxicity or dysfunction in the team environment. I'm just saying that my reaction, my response, that was the thing that was keeping me stuck. that was keeping me from growing, that was keeping me from actually having a voice. And, I've said this before on previous podcasts, my need for belonging and acceptance is so strong. It's part of my makeup as a 2 on the Enneagram, but it is for everyone. We all have a need to belong. So it kind of kicked me into the survival instinct of fawning in order to feel like I fit in. So whatever it took to fit in. So I think it caused me to tolerate far more unhealthy dynamics than I should have. And I look back and I wonder why I didn't speak up, why I didn't, actually, I changed that. I did try to speak up, but I didn't feel that I was being effective. I didn't feel I was being heard. And it just made me feel even more like it was my fault. And I think that's part of it. I actually blamed myself for that dysfunction. And I took on all the responsibility and I kept trying to fix it again and again and again. And yes, that's the classic definition of codependency. But because of the way I was raised, I took in this huge amount of responsibility. And then when I wasn't able to change things for myself, I felt ineffective. I felt like I didn't have a voice. I felt like I wasn't being respected. And it got to the point where, I questioned whether I should even speak or write, whether I even had anything of value to say, whether I had a voice. This was a pretty tough time. Get emotional thinking about it. Anyway, and I think that's part of my healing is that I can let myself feel the emotion of it and not shut it down, not shame myself for feeling it, because it was a tough time. And on top of that, my first book that I wrote came out in 2014. So that's literally 10 years ago. And although I love writing and I know I'm actually pretty good at it, I just felt like maybe I was this one book wonder because no matter how many times I sat down and tried to write something, it just I couldn't produce anything. And again, looking back, I realized that I was struggling with a lot of self-doubt and insecurity, and I really felt the imposter syndrome big time, which we've talked about in some of our episodes. I think I was my own worst enemy, actually. I mean, I'm not saying that the world and the people in it and circumstances aren't hard. We face hard stuff all the time. But really, ultimately, it's ourselves and what we choose to believe and our narratives and all of that. That is the thing that holds us back. And that's definitely what's going on. The narratives in my head were brutal. They were absolutely brutal. And of course, I hid all of that. I mean, so if you met me, you would see me as confident and in charge and knowing what I was doing. But I hid all that because I was in a position of leadership and influence. I mean, I'm Dr. Mary. I'm supposed to have it all together. Which, if you've hung around long enough with me personally, but also on this podcast, you know that I totally don't. And I'm getting more and more okay with being able to acknowledge that I don't have it all together. But at that time, I hid it from myself because, my favorite defense mechanism is denial. So I was in a huge state of denial. And I just kept telling myself, I'm just too busy. I just. But really what was going on is because I was stuck. And in that place of stuckness, I couldn't write. I couldn't write from an authentic place. I think I thought I was going to write from a place of I'm an expert, and so I should write from there, but it just was not coming out. I realized I had to work through my own stuff. I was coaching other people on identifying the blocks that's holding them back, but I wasn't doing such a great job of dealing with those blocks myself. I don't think it was until I was at my lowest point in my sense of purpose, when I felt like I was voiceless and ineffective, when I was just so exhausted from trying so hard and getting nowhere, that I finally realized, crap, doctor, heal thyself. And that began a journey of a lot of layers of unpacking, undoing. I realized I was just trying so hard to fit in, to meet the expectations of others. I was trying to be liked by everyone. That this was a pattern that began in me from a very young age, like I shared already culturally. And you'll see in the book I share some stories also of things that shaped me. And I realized that if I didn't undo all that, if I didn't undo all the things that I thought I had to do to be loved, I wouldn't be able to break free. It'd just be the same old, same old. And it's funny, when you finally start doing the work, it becomes very real. I mean, facing the pain, the brokenness, my history, the impact that it's had on me, the wrong beliefs, the faulty filters. Oh my gosh, it's so hard. But you know what? It was also incredibly, incredibly freeing. And I wonder now what took me so long. So this book, we're going to go through this session, Rebecoming, is kind of a little bit of, it's not really a journal because there's a lot of like science and psychology that I put in there, but you'll see my story embedded in it. But I wrote it as I had experienced it. And I, believe it or not, it took me 4 weeks to write it. It just flowed because it was coming from a place of such authenticity of what I had lived, what I knew to be true. Oh, I'm going to get emotional again. And what I long for you as our viewers and listeners to also experience. And I'm not saying I'm done. I'm going to have to reread my words again and again because the journey of growth is a hard one. The journey of transformation is lifelong. And we have these patterns that are hard to break. I'm getting better at recognizing those patterns. But still, I can find myself going into those places, especially when I get triggered. So the reason why Gillian and I decided to focus on this book, Rebecoming, is because we truly, truly believe that it's going to help you if you, and I always say in quotes, work the program. Some chapters you'll find you'll resonate with more than others, and it's okay. I mean, go back to the ones that really resonate with you, and there are digging deeper sections in there that asks you questions that help you personalize it so that you can do the work that you need to do. Now, it doesn't mean that you need to buy the book to enjoy this season and to get a lot from it. But for myself personally, having a book where I can refer to it, underline it, make notes, journal, I find helpful. So I would encourage you to consider doing that. And you don't necessarily need to read it in advance, but maybe you can read along with us. So I am inviting you to join us in this journey of growth and just join us on this ride. I hope that you will do this for yourself because you are so worth it. I hope that you will find this to be an encouraging season and that you can look back on this season after it's done and say, yeah, I have grown. I have come a long way from where I first started. So come join us for the ride. Thanks for listening or watching and tuning in. And come back next episode as I say, walk through what it was like for me to write the book and all the stuff that came from it, all the feels throughout that process. All right, so great to introduce season 6. I'm very, very excited. And thank you for tuning in. And we'll chat soon. Take care.
Thanks for listening to the Fully Lived Life podcast. We hope you found it encouraging and helpful. Be sure to follow or subscribe so that you never miss a new episode. And if you enjoyed our show, please help spread the word by sharing with your friends and family and posting on your social media. Thanks for listening and tune in to our next episode.